Good.
Here we go.
People who are selling a dealership that maybe has been in the family a while, where they own the dirt, or B, maybe a gentleman or an owner who buys a business but maybe doesn't own the dirt, or possibly, to your point a little earlier, that person owns a dirt lot or runs a dirt lot that it maybe aspires to have a franchise in the future, who doesn't own the lot. He's just sort of, he's got a dream and a bunch of cars and a building, and he's trying to sell them and hoping to make money.
Recording in progress.
What would advice be for that person who says, "Hey, I want to sell my dealership. What's the advantage to say selling the whole thing or like keeping the land?" That's number one example. And number two example, that person's your advantage. You maybe bought a business or runs a business, whether they own the property or not, as to what the upside is for maybe making that call and going all in and saying, "Okay, now I want to own the land." Like, what's your thought on those two, and like, how would you advise that person with those scenarios?
Yeah, so if you're in a position to sell a business, a dealership, and you own the land and you've got this operational business, because generally you're going to structure it as two different businesses, right? You got a real estate business that you own, and then you have an operational company that you own, which is the business itself. And you'll structure it so the operational business will sign a lease or pay rent to your real estate business. And there's some tremendous tax advantages associated with that, and ways that you can defer some taxable gain. So then you have a choice on the real estate where if you sell the whole package, then now you're looking at a potentially large capital gain. You're looking at, if there's a lot of equity in that property, you're looking at most likely a one-time lump sum payout, although it could be structured, over a period of time. And that might be what you want, just a clean cut. I'm out, and I want the money for something, and there's different things you can utilize that money for. But you also might be happy with the acquisition price you get for your business itself, and you want to maintain the land for a number of reasons. It could be in a great location that's appreciating over time, and maybe it's something that you want to pass to your children. Maybe it's something you want to create an annuitized stream of retirement income, so you get a lump sum for the sale of the business, which is a good day. Definitely get your Tommy Bahama shirt on and throw the party, and pop the champagne and have a great day. But when you get back from all that revelry, you come back and now you have the new owner paying you, X amount of money every single month for the privilege of just operating the business you just sold them on the land that you own.
Yeah, so that was a quick video. It's part of an interview I just did on Friday. The gentleman's name is Paul Neal, and he helps businesses in multiple verticals finance things. So it was kind of an interesting discussion about what do you do in automotive if you want to maybe finance the dirt, finance a building, finance expansion, different things. So it's an interesting interview. I should have it edited and up hopefully by the end of this week. So we'll go from there. So let's get into it. Good morning and welcome. And we have two wonderful people on this morning. We got Larry Feldman and Tom Kline, so I'm sure it'll be interesting. I was going to have Troy Glenn on from CDK, but for obvious reasons, they're not talking much right now. So as you can expect. Okay, here we go.
name's Tony Kline. I'm the general manager of Fred Bean's Kia in Langhorne. Just wanted to take a minute to talk about Larry Feldman, Career Changers USA. Larry and I have been working together for about the last 12 years now. And anything I've ever needed as far as recruiting, training, Larry has been right there. Larry's got me salespeople, he's got me managers, he's got me technicians even through the toughest times in the industry. And he is just the kind of guy who's going to tell you exactly what's on his mind. He's going to tell you exactly what he thinks. But Larry also has the expertise to back it up. When he was in the dealership world, he was a top performer. And that's really important to my staff, especially as it pertains to training. A lot of people can come in and teach out a textbook, but Larry has real world experience dealing with customers, dealing with situations in dealerships that we go through on a daily basis and try to train on. But Larry's been through it, so he can really empathize with the people and tell you what's worked for him and maybe what way not to go. Larry is just always at a 10. I mean, his energy level is always up there. And I think people, they just love that and they feed off of it. He's not faking it. He is genuinely excited to come in and help you. He's excited to come in and help grow your business. And he's one of those people who just really enjoys seeing dealers succeed and have a lot of fun at the same time.
Life is about connection. Having a support system to lean on. And roads to endless possibility. At every turn, guiding the way, we are building the connections that move you.
So what would your dealership feel like if your entire sales staff was literally on fire, your sales and service staff? They were nonstop all over social media, completely dominating your marketplace. They could do it in 30 days or less and then continue their education to do it for an entire 6 months or a year. You literally would completely take over the entire marketplace and no one would be able to compete with you. And that's what we can do for you. So when you're walking around your community, whether you're at local restaurants or you're going to the gym, you don't want to be bothered? Fine, you won't be bothered. But a lot of people will walk up to you and say, oh my God, I love your social media. Your staff is amazing. We love what you're doing in the community. We want to come buy a car from you. We want to get an oil change at your dealership. Your community is absolutely going to love you. And it doesn't matter what platform you're on. You could be on TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all social media platforms. You will literally be all over the place. And not only will you have ads running, but your own staff is going to be promoting your brand and promoting themselves within the dealership and within the business. So it's like running an ad times 100-fold because your entire staff is participating in the process. I've traveled all over North America. I've trained Toyota. I've trained Nissan. I've been to driving sales. I've been to Women in Auto. I get hired as a speaker for conferences at universities all over the country. And I can help change the trajectory of your dealership right now.
Good morning and welcome. So there's been a lot going on in the automotive world for the last week or so. And I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about it. Maybe start with an intro. I mean, Tom, tell us more about what you do, and then we'll go to the Larry side. Just so everyone's aware, the views and opinions of the guests on the show are theirs alone. You can check out that disclaimer on our website at autohubshow.com. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
No worries.
Very good to see you. So my name is Tom Kline. My company is called Better Vantage Point. And I'm a former dealership owner for 30 years. And when we sold our stores in 2019, I went out and opened my own consulting business, which consults mostly in risk and compliance for dealerships. And what I like to say is that running a dealership is like trying to tuck an octopus into bed, and the tentacles keep flopping all over the place. And so my job is to help tuck those tentacles and make sure that the dealership's assets are safe. So that's what I do.
Interesting. So kind of I guess a very much a part of somewhat of what Larry does. He helps find staff, but more importantly, train that staff. And I guess these days we kind of feel like we're bridging that gap between digital and paper. And these days, I've seen a lot of posts in the last week or so where, hey, let me teach you how to go back to paper and do those deals, the way they used to be done. So, Larry, what's your experience been with that as we've sort of seen a lot of, change in the last week?
Well, I have tremendous empathy for dealers that are grappling with this and the amount of people that are having problems getting paid, and it's ugly. So I don't want to make light of it.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, I have a handful of dealers that bust my chops constantly. Because when I go into a dealership, I handwrite, print the name of anybody I'm trying to get hired, their email, and their phone number. And I always ask them twice and repeat it back to them, so I try not to make any mistakes. And guys will say, man, what's wrong with you? What are you, a dinosaur? Pieces of paper? Who uses piece of paper? Well, guess what? My pieces of paper are not compromised. They don't go down. There's no problem with accessing them. So as I'm always on my same soapbox, to not embrace technology is foolish. I always love to quote my idol, Ben Frank, said, when you're finished changing, you're finished. But to remove the human element, to not be able to correct a problem, to not be able to hey, Tom and I have been around a long time. You've been around a long time. If everything went down, I can still calculate by hand the lease. I can still calculate a payment. It's the net effect of having social media and iPhones rob us of our capacity to think. People younger than us don't know how to spell, because I'll meet you at the mall. You is now you, not bio. Tom, you and me couldn't have got out of elementary school if we didn't realize that, 7 times 7 is 49. We got that stuff memorized. These kids don't know how to add, subtract. They don't know how to think. They type everything into their phone, so 2 days later, they don't even remember what they said or what they did. So it just, all it does is make a crazy guy like me look a little smarter, because I've been saying from the jump, let's use the technology, let's absorb it, but to lose the human touch does not happen. Tom Kline and I have become friends since we met when I was hanging around with Ian in Las Vegas. We've spoken several times. There's never been a time we were supposed to speak or connect that we didn't, because we communicate. Tom, I laugh every time I say to somebody, hey, this looks interesting, let's talk. And they send me their schedule to type on a computer. I ignore them. I didn't send you a computerized message. It's the old thing. I tell you, please text me, or please call me, and you text me. I'm not interested, because you're not listening. So we hopefully this stuff will get on. But I've also said, and I stick by it, I'm not shocked by this. Because when there's this much data laying around, and there's this many crooks laying around, it's going to happen. Tom will tell you his whole thing is compliance and how to keep cover your butt, make sure you're okay. But Tom, I'll never go broke, ever, because people are always going to need recruiting and training more now than ever. Well, he's never going to go broke, because you can go into any dealership on earth, and they're paying $1 zillion, stupidly, not to Tom, but to some compliance company. Look on the desk and you'll see licenses, which is a fine. So when you're absolutely not prepared, Tom, I always say one of the best pieces of advice you'll get your whole life is from a boxing match. I'm a boxing fan. And the last thing that the referee says after he says, obey all my commands, is protect yourself at all times. And Tom will tell you, most dealers do not protect themselves. The managers don't police the salespeople. The salespeople don't understand the importance of keeping data safe and secure. And as a guy told me, Larry, it's the most backward system of all time. If somebody steals somebody's information, okay, and ruins their life, but you dotted the I's, crossed the T's, you're fine. On the other hand, if nothing ever happened and nobody ever got in trouble, we find a license on your desk, you're getting fined. So with that kind of illogical regulation, there's only one answer. Be careful, protect yourself. There's a lot of crooks out there. There's a lot of creeps out there. And again, I'm certainly not a tech guy, but I don't think anybody with any concept of how things work could realize with that kind of information laying around, at some point it had to be hacked and held for ransom. Tom, how many times your Citibank, this card, that card, everything's getting hacked. They can't hack my piece of paper because here it is.
Yeah, and in fairness, and I had some discussions with the connections I have. It's not just this company alone. It's not just this company alone.
Wait, Ian, when you say connections you have, are you talking about business or drug connections? To have me and Tom Kline on the show, okay? A guy that likes fucking octopuses and a guy that can relate to them. I mean, there has to be some kind of chemical imbalance in your own mind.
Well, it's funny.
Tom, you wanted to say it.
It's funny that you bring that up. So I was talking to connections that I have, and not in the drug world, but in the business world. Anyway, in automotive. And, there were some companies, not to mention names, that were jumping on other companies during this. And, I think you got to be careful because everything is hackable. So it's not just a question of data. It's a question of compliance. But more importantly, protecting yourself just in case bad things do happen. And we all know that nothing's perfect. So I guess it's actually a really good segue, Tom. I mean, you've probably had more questions than normal about this. What do I do as a backup? Number one, and B, what do I do as a dealer, no matter what the software is, to protect myself from this kind of stuff happening? Like, what do I do?
Yeah. So I'm gonna follow on to Larry's comments, which I'm gonna botch the quote exactly, but I'll get it close enough. Which Mike Tyson famously said, "Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face," right? So everybody's getting, unfortunately, and I, like Larry, I have a lot of empathy for the dealerships because everybody's getting punched in the face over the last week, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. CDK says that everyone was going to that they were going to start getting people up by June the 30th. There's certainly select dealers that I've heard that are now up, but certainly not the majority. So I think they're going to have to phase them in slowly, and that could take weeks, which is really terrible for the dealerships. I think it was JP Morgan did a study that said the average cyber ransom incident took 24 days. That was the average. So, we'll see what happens as more dealers, get up. But to answer your question directly, Ian, it's kind of a twofold, risk mitigation is kind of a twofold thing, right? You have to have compliance on one side, and the other side, you have to have risk transference.
Okay.
And by risk transference, I mean, even if you're complying with all the right things, even if you're doing all the right things, that doesn't mean that you're not going to, in this case, you're not going to get hacked, right? You can still get hacked. But then the question is what have you done from a risk transference? Do you have the policies written down? Do your Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, have you actually taken that information seriously? Did you implement all the things that you were supposed to by June 9th of last year? Is that stuff done? And then importantly, what insurance do you have in place in order to pay in case you do have a ransom, do have a hack and a breach? And I'm going to use, for everyone's reference, I'm going to use some really rough math because I think this math is important to get straight for the dealerships. And then I'm looking forward to your feedback after I give you this little bit of a math equation. So, from my experience, the average DMS and the average CRM, a single point dealership will have, let's just say, 250,000 names, which is probably low and conservative. Thoughts on that? You think that's fair? Larry, is that fair?
More than fair, and I would say it errs on the low side.
Okay, I agree. But for now, let's just err on the fair side. So if you have a breach, and let's just say all the names are breached, there's a full breach, all 250,000 names, and as a part of the settlement, you'll read when you read through these things with the FTC and the attorneys general and how they all come out. One thing that is a common theme is that the dealership or the business, whether it was a dealership that was hacked or the business, ends up paying for credit monitoring for a year. Okay, that's $100 a month, unless you can get a bulk discount, of which I don't know that you can, but let's just call it $100. And let's just say that half of the 250,000 people sign up for it. Okay, so that's 125,000. So if you do the quick math, 125,000 times $100 is 12.5 million. That's just for the credit monitoring. That doesn't include any litigation fees, any public relation fees, any fees that it costs to get back up, any business interruption claims, right? There's just so much more. So when you're thinking about, business interruption and what a cyber attack and a breach can do, that's 12.5 million just for credit monitoring.
Right.
And so when dealerships are thinking about this area, they should consider what kind of insurance they can get, what the sublimits are, right? Ransom, like if you have ransom insurance, just because you have 12, let's say you have 10 million, which is high for a lot of dealerships. Most dealerships hover in between 1 and 5 million. But let's just say that they have that. Ransom doesn't always hit the total limit. It's not, if you have 5 million, it doesn't mean you have 5 million of ransom insurance. It means you have 5 million of total, like a total pot of money to work from.
Right.
So you have to check the sublimits and see what's there. So it requires some detail, and it requires some time to kind of vet all that through and have that,
You're saying that they're not assuming the worst. It's like underinsuring yourself, and then when there's a catastrophe, you realize that you hurt yourself twice.
Correct.
So let's just say you're looking at that number of, say, $12 million or whatever. Is that something that can be easily covered from insurance? Is that something that, that some dealers are proactive and they got that kind of coverage or more, or what's your thought?
He's saying, if you don't mind, because I've spoken to Tom about this countless times, what he's saying is you have to be aware of what you have and what you don't have. Because to be naive in certain situations is dangerous. To be naive in these situations is fatal. It'll put you out of business.
What he said.
and by the way, building on what my buddy Tom said, he mentioned Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was so scary to other boxers that he won the matches before he ever got in the ring. They were so terrified of him. Then he did what heavyweight champions have always done. He thought, I can beat this chump without even training. And he went from the famous, everybody's got a plan till they get hit in the mouth, till fighting Evander Holyfield's ear, because you realize the guy that was a blown up light heavyweight was kicking his butt.
Yeah.
This is what dealerships do. These dealerships build themselves up because somebody's smart, somebody's hungry, somebody's willing to work hard, somebody has a plan. And then they reach a certain level where all that goes by the wayside. Yeah, Tom, you've read my book, Ian's read it. There's a line in there that everybody should know, if I can say so unhumbled, which is, if you want to get rich, act like you're broke. If you want to go broke, act like you're rich. To not be careful in these, Tom, you've never seen me live. Ian's had the pleasure or the displeasure multiple times. I basically torture people and talk about subjects that would make any HR person implode. I get away with it. Why? Because I listen hard enough to know where I'm going, and I make the people understand that I care. If I just came out and started cursing, you throwing the F-bomb around and being over the top, I'd get fired and I'd get banned. It's a matter of knowing what your limits are and what your ROI is and what your risk. And dealerships don't get it. I'm crazy, but I'm the most meticulous person you will meet. I try not to ever make a mistake because I know what happens when you do. All three of us are car dogs. All of us have seen 3 days get blown out of your schedule because you were dumb enough not to take the serial number and miles off the trade that's wrong. So all I want to do is get through my day. I want to do a deal once, not twice. I want to mitigate the risk because there's people out there and lawyers out there that live to sue us. They don't make up. We had an instance, Tom, in Jersey where the lawyers, they sued us over dock fees. The lawyers made $6 or $7 million. $6 or $7 million. You know what
Right.
all the customers got? They got a note that the next time they come in, they get $100.
Right.
Well, if that's what we're dealing with, to
Right.
not protect yourself at all times. This is like we met in Las Vegas. This is like walking around with your money sticking out of your top pocket and a sign that says "I'm blind. Be nice to my dog." You're gonna get robbed. So to not understand how important it is, listen. I say it all the time. I have no plans of dying, and I have no plans of burning my house down. I have fire insurance on my house and life insurance. What Tom's point is always, listen, I want everybody to prosper. I hope nobody needs but to not have it, it's really ugly to wake up and see what's going on because you can't mitigate this disaster. I know, and I feel like if I lose a day, I miss something. A day, and I'm in hundreds of dealers. I'm everywhere. You guys see me on LinkedIn. Imagine you're a dealer. I don't own my store anymore. Tom doesn't own his. Okay, E and you lost yours when they heard about those drug connections. We noticed how you buckled right over that. Tom quit. But the point is, if you lose a day, if you're shut down, people freak out. 24 days on average? You're basically giving up a month? Now, this is not 2 years ago where, that's the car at 7,000 over. Do you want it or not, Joan? This is people are fighting for their lives. I mean, people are leaving, which is great for me, okay? But the bottom line is you got guys quitting, you got profit margins have dwindled, and Tom, how sad and ironic is it? It's Dostoevsky going wild. For 2 years, dealers had no cars, and they used it as a profit margin by saying that's the only one. Now they have way too many cars. It's a non-political program. He brings me in to speak the truth because Joe Biden doesn't understand the concept that you raise interest rates and you tamp down spending. Inflation's horrible. So all of a sudden, guys that had no cars and no floor plan, and when they had it, the floor plan was zero, now have 7, 8, 9%. So you can't afford to lose 24 days. I think the sharp guys realize they'll lose a day or two's a disaster. So that's why, and I'm endorsing him only because I know him and I respect him. That's why to not be in touch with a guy named Tom Kline, okay, is foolish because all he's trying to do is, remember the old commercial, we're all old guys, pay me now or pay me later? Only you can't afford to pay later. You can't, I don't care how good these guys are. A lot of them are cash poor and property rich. Who's going to come up with 10, 20, 30, $40 million? And you don't think that's going to have ripple effects in the industry?
So what if you are protected? That's a great point, Larry. So if you are protected from this, how quickly can this be resolved? Like how quickly do these companies respond? Like when you have this kind of
They're
issue?
not in any. Last time I interrupted you, I'm exhausting what little I know about anything.
All good.
The problem is they're in no hurry because they understand that the longer they keep you for ransom, the more desperate you get. And while you're figuring out how to get control your data, they're selling it off to the dark web anyway. Am I correct, Tom?
Yeah, it's true. And I don't remember the exact statistics, Ian, but there's a large percentage of ransom. I think it's at least more than 50% that after you pay, they still sell your data anyway, right?
Tom, they're criminals.
Exactly.
All of a sudden they're going to get honorable?
Right, exactly. So you can have the best plans, you can have good insurance, and you can still have a super big problem. But what insurance will do for you and a staff who's trained on knowing what to do, which I want to mention too, both Larry and I train, but we train on different topics. And if somebody comes up to one of your staff members and you're down, does anybody know what they're supposed to say to the public? Like, has whoever's at the top, whether it's the owner or an executive management group, have they said to all the employees, if anyone calls, here's what we want you to say, right? Things that simple have to come from the top. And that's part of making sure you mitigate your risk. If the local news station comes up, and this is an example I use frequently, local news station comes up and finds the lot attendant and says, so what do you think about this CDK outage? And then you've got the lot attendant. If he doesn't know what the corporate is, the corporate mandate is, does he either refer that to someone or does he just have diarrhea of the mouth and say a bunch of stuff that you would never want in the air.
That's a very apt analogy, because being closed for 24 days, a lot of GMs will wind up being a lot of tenants.
Yeah.
So I got insurance. I got a process. I got my staff trained. I'm dealing with a problem from whatever company. How are they getting help from these insurance companies? Is the insurance company prepared for this kind of thing? I mean, like, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, these insurance, this is what they do, right? So if you have a breach, they have the lawyers, they have the public relations people, they have the market, and basically they'll start and help manage all of the things, because there are so many things to manage. To Larry's point earlier, I don't want our dealers to get what I call a case of the yets, which is I haven't had a problem yet, so I'm not going to worry about it yet, right? And that's what my practice is about. Is let's not have problems. For example, I literally hung up the phone right before the show with one of my clients who is hosting a beer fest and up in the Northeast, and they said, what kind of disclaimer should I put on the ticket? And I said, well, first thing you have to do before because they get a couple tickets that they get to give away, right? Yeah. And so I said, the first thing you have to do before you do that is call your insurance company and make sure you have post-liquor liability insurance, which means that if anything happens as a result of, you have somebody gets in a car, or they blame you because you're a sponsor or whatever.
Causal effect.
Yeah. I beg your pardon?
Causal effect.
Right. You've got to make sure. And so these preventative measures, of course, everybody agrees that a pound of, what's the expression, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, another Ben Franklin quote.
Yep.
Right. And except most people's medicine cabinets are empty.
Tom, I gotta say, you don't seem to know a lot about Ben Franklin American history. Is there a chance while you were in elementary school you were just drawing octopuses on the page? I think we're starting to get to the bottom of the root psychology.
Well, I did just watch Michael Douglas, so for 8 hours on the miniseries of Franklin, so that should qualify me for something, right, Larry?
You want to read the Walter Isaacson biography. He did a decent job, but nobody can really capture the essence of Franklin, because he's the most inventive, curious, brilliant, essential person that will ever live in America. And we don't have a country that doesn't bring the French into the war. I discovered electricity. He's the one that said, when Jefferson drew up, we hold these truths sacred and self-evident, take out sacred, because we want to have a separation of church and state, okay? And he was chasing women around Paris in his 80s, and there was no Viagra. You didn't know he was a player, did you?
I did once. I watched Michael Douglas.
Well, what was it? I was reading this morning. Dick Van Dyke was making some comment about I think it was a debate. He said, "I'm 96. I'm still sharp as a tack," and I was like, "That was interesting."
That's not ageism. That's hating a candidate so much, namely Trump, that you throw out all logic and concept, because any human being, and I don't care who says what, that can defend letting 10 million people in our country and cutting off gas, which empowers our enemies, makes any sense, the heck of it.
Yeah.
And if any Jewish people out there have a problem with me, it's Larry Feldman. Feel free to call me. I'll pop their damn octopus. Go ahead.
So
by the way, the disclaimer at the beginning of the show was obviously aimed at Tom Kline, not me, because I don't really have anything controversial.
Absolutely.
So what kind of fight back do you get from dealers who just say, well, that's not going to happen to me?
I can answer that for Tom, because it's what I get when I say you need training. We're fine. My guys are perfect. We don't leave anything laying around. We're on top. I can read Tom's mind, because all he's saying is, you're not going to pay me that much, but you're going to save your career and your business. And they look at him and stupidly say, now we got it together. Am I correct, Tom?
It takes some enlightened entrepreneurs to understand. And part of that, I think, is based on how dealers become dealers. Actually, most of them come up through the sales channel, right, Larry? So they become salesmen, and then sales managers, and they're GSMs, and then they're GMs, and then they buy the store. And so they've never had exposure to the compliance side and the risk side, and they just don't know what they don't know. And I think it's mostly that. I really think it's a lack of understanding of the importance of these things, and that's part of my communication is making sure everybody does understand the importance, especially we are in a very active time for regulations. The CARS rule, which is pending litigation. The fines right now for the FTC is $51,744 per violation, and the FTC doesn't define what a violation is. So if you make the same mistake over and over, that can be 15 violations, or if you can negotiate, maybe it's 1 violation. You'll have to, and fines from the FTC, by the way, are not covered under most dealership policies. So fines from regulators aren't covered. They're not a covered entity. So there is an insurance product that will do that, which is called directors and officers insurance, and that will often, depends on the policy, but that'll often cover fines. But again, you have to study this stuff to understand it, to know where your soft underbelly is, so you know what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. Kind of the real answer to Larry's question is, my thing is to make sure that dealers understand what their risk is, what's covered and what's not. By nature, they're entrepreneurial and risk averse, which is fine, as long as they understand what can put them out of business and what can't. Whatever choice they make for whatever risks they have is certainly up to them, because it's their business. But my job as a consultant is to say, here's where your risks lie. Here's what your insurance may or may not cover, depending on your policy. So here's where you're exposed. And if you're comfortable with that, that's great. But all these things need to be revisited, because risk is a continuous process. It's not something that
and a changing process, Tom, because the risks that we had 20 years ago aren't the same.
Listen, Friday, the Supreme Court ruled in a case called Chevron, and what this case, and I'm still understanding all the nuances here. But the reason I'm bringing this up is the way I understand the ruling is that the courts are going to have more jurisdiction over the regulatory bodies than they ever have before, because they overruled this 1984 case. And so now the judiciary may have more impact than these regulations. I don't know yet. That's yet to be seen. But these are things that we need to continue to have conversation about, to make sure that everyone is aware of what these cases are. And I'm waiting for a lot of the lawyers to opine on what they believe that Chevron will do for our industry. I haven't seen anything yet, because literally this is just on Friday.
It'll help, Tom, it'll help our industry and anybody that's in business, because there is no business person on earth that likes over-regulation, because what it does is it prevents us and stops us from moving forward. I saw a small feature on a network about a woman that was on a shrimp boat, and they had to have someone to monitor. They were paying more for the monitor than they were for the people in the boats that were actually producing what they were doing. Whether you're a conspiracy theorist or not, you understand that we shouldn't have unelected officials making rules for people, since we didn't elect them. It wasn't the will of the people. We're a republic. But the interesting thing is, Tom said something that bears thinking about. He said that a lot of these guys are entrepreneurs that came up through sales. Before we ever get to the horrible, horrible concept and possibility to get put out of business by a ransomware they grab, think about the fact that since so many dealers come up through the sales end, they neglect the service department. Because almost every dealer will tell you one of his big problems is lack of retention in service, which bleeds through and means you not only lose that business, which is tremendous profit margin, but lose the chance to sell them another car. And yet, how many dealers lay awake at night thinking, gosh, I got to have a prominent tire display and a fair oil change. I won't make money on it, but it's far from a loss leader. It's a profit gatherer, because I'll keep people in. So if they're not willing to see what's right in front of them with I don't want to lose people through service. That as mandatory as a demo ride should be, a service walk should be just as mandatory. Now you get into the ephemeral of, well, you could get sued, and how about this, and how about that? I got insurance, Tom, stop out. I'm not bothering you. I'm just trying to keep you from losing everything you've worked for, because when they hit you with these suits, it's crazy. And when you get the government involved, or people get a sharp lawyer, or it becomes a class action suit, it's scary how this. And he said something that every dealer should pay attention to, that the fines aren't covered. Because it's like saying you applied for life insurance and swore you weren't a smoker, and we found out you've been smoking all this time. You negated what you saw. If it's your bad action that prompted this, you're not covered. Am I saying that correctly, Bob?
Absolutely. And listen, I've been to court hundreds and hundreds of times. Deposed.
Yeah, but your lawyer's got a good case. You're going to beat all that stuff, Tom.
That's it.
And not, we'll visit you frequently. We'll even bring you some octopus pie if that's what turns on.
That's great. But and I do expert witness work for dealerships, and so the important part is I have spent, when I was at the dealership, I've spent $80,000 in 1 month on defense costs. It's not hard to do. It really is not. And so when you're thinking, I've got all these millions of dollars of coverage, spend $80,000 in a month, and then you look at your coverage and see if you have enough. And with that, I'll say good morning to Tim Hayden.
Mr. Tim. So, Tim, we're talking a little bit about, I don't know, the elephant in the room these days around data and coverage, but, I mean, you're the data guy, so.
It's the octopus in the room. We got Tom Kline.
Yeah.
We were talking about,
right here.
Other than me being a little crazy, we're discussing the fact that in the same way dealers have neglected fixed operations and don't realize by not having the proper retention, what they lose. A way scarier problem is they don't understand how important the coverage is and what it covers and what it doesn't cover. And
right.
That since the data is laying there in every single dealership, and you got guys laying awake at night figuring, how can I rob you or hurt you? That it's not, this is no longer a luxury. To not be prepared and insured properly to cover yourself, to understand the vagaries of what's covered, what's not, that if it's considered a misaction on your part, that the fines aren't covered, and that's when we got to see your smiling face then.
So, Tim, why don't you weigh in?
Well, I've talked about this with Larry. I've talked about it on this show, and recently I've called Tom and we've talked about it. We actually sat down and talked about this a little bit, but yeah, it's what Larry just said, right? You've got Bob on your floor, who's had a bad month, and his wife just left him. He's just not in good shape. Period. He brings a thumb drive to the office one day, and he downloads everything he can from the CMR, the CRM, or the DMS, and he walks down the street and he gets a job somewhere else. That's a very real situation, especially when we understand a changing and shifting statistic about churn in terms of talent. That's what Larry's talking about there, right? Is just understanding the data's all over the place. It's not too hard to train people on how to use things like multi-factor authentication and other ways that you can protect information that the dealership has. And at the same time, the jam here is that most of them, and this is what Tom and I talked about, is it's not human to fill out an application for cyber insurance. It's not a human thing to do, especially if you lack the technical aptitude or competency to understand all the questions that are being asked of you. So you've got a whole lot of car dealers that are out there paying $10,000 a year in premiums for $50,000 worth of coverage. And I can tell you right now, if Bob has a bad day or worse, CDK goes down and forgets everything that it had in it, which that did not happen. But if that did happen, it's going to cost you a whole lot more than $50,000, especially if you got to pay Russians to get it back.
Hey, Tim, I said it before you came on. What's really mind-boggling is, I'm not kidding now, you've got a next-level guy like Tom Kline. You got a next-level guy like Tim Hayden. You guys are Scary smart. I walk into dealerships, they still have licenses sitting on the desk, which is a fine. So
Totally.
if you don't have it on the most basic kind of level, understanding how important it is to secure the data, and that's not part, you're done. I'm of everybody on this show, all three of you, I'm the least technical, no question. But I knew this was coming. Anybody that was paying attention knew it was coming. Here's the data. It's in a set place. Way too many people have it. Listen, Tim, how about the guy that's not malicious, but they didn't change his password when he left, and his stuff's out there, and somebody hacks his account?
Right.
It's just too many points of entry where people can do you harm. So, the concept here is you get a Tim Hayden, who besides being one of the smartest guys around is one of the nicest. You get a Tom Kline, okay, who can ensure you and explain to you what you need. And when both of these brilliant gentlemen fail miserably, you call Larry Feldman and I'll get you a whole new staff. See what
What a great angle.
I think that was a pretty pragmatic discussion. I think I laid that out pretty well.
I think it's brilliant.
So what do you think the solution is here? I mean, obviously everybody's going to get probably much more interested in compliance than they were, and I'm sure some of them were lost asleep at the wheel. But what do you think is going to be the next step?
Let me go first because these two guys are smarter than me, so it'll get exponentially better.
Yeah.
I am a student of human beings. I really am. That's why my stuff is crazy, but everybody seems to, thank God, like my content. Human beings are insane. They don't make any sense, and there's no logic. If you've ever read Greek mythology where the gods always knew how to torture you the most, this is what we do to ourselves. So very rarely does somebody get up in the morning and say, I feel great. I think I'm going to completely change my diet and my workout. No. It's when they go to the doctor and the doctor says, you're going to be dead in 6 months. That's when they quit smoking or quit drinking and start working out. So we've had a catastrophic situation here. I said before you got on, Tim, the dealers freak out if they lose a day, if their phone system's down. We believe they're going to lose 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. And then once the ransom's paid, they'll sell it to the dark web, and God knows what will happen then.
Right.
So hopefully some people wake up and say, wait a minute. First of all, we need multiple places to put our data. So if God forbid something hacked, we're not completely out of business. Okay? Then they need to, as always, adjust their thinking. Tim, you're going to laugh. I was the last guy, and I owned the place, to use a computer. All right? Whacked out as I am, I have an incredibly good memory. I write things down every day. It's like, well, what do I? Well, of course, I've adapted, and now I run all my businesses off of my cell phone and my computer. I've adapted a little bit. And I've learned not to be so friendly with people, because a lot of people that want to be your friend on LinkedIn or this and that are just looking to suck your information. So I've learned, well, if these big dealerships don't learn that, if they don't go, all they're going to do is continue to make Tom richer, you richer, and me really richer, because they'll continue to do the same horrible things. At some point, you have to say, I'm on the wrong track. Let me change it. And that's one of the trickiest things with human behavior, because we have a tendency not to react until we've been given dire consequences, and then we only hope it's not too late. You guys agree?
Absolutely.
I entirely agree. I mean, I think you were talking about licenses on the desk, and I'm sure Tom had talked a little bit about some of the things he sees when it comes to compliance.
You got on late. He actually plants the licenses on the desk and says, see, you need me. He's very pragmatic as far as business goes.
That's right. But it's God's honest truth is that dealers have been so wrapped up in the transactional performance of just moving metal, which of course is natural. It is absolutely natural. It's a human thing to do. It is an entrepreneurial thing to want to have happen. And by God, for people who work mostly on commission, it is their livelihood. At the same time, though, being able to preserve and protect the customer relationship today is translated into data protection. It is translated into being able to govern your data in a way that's not just compliant with the FTC safeguard rules, not just compliant if you're in one of those 14 states that has data privacy laws now. It's not just compliant with that, but you're actually able to improve the performance of the dealership. You're actually able to sell more because you're building better relationships, or because you have more accurate insights on what's going on with your business because you took these steps. So my big thing on this too is just that most dealers want to run from, right? They want to run from FTC regulations. They want to run from data privacy laws, when in fact, these are prescriptions on what you need to do to invest in better governance on your data, which will, by God, protect you for all against all the things we're talking about here, which are going to be the outside threats, are going to be willy-nilly vendors who leave doors open for Russian hackers to come in and disrupt them and disrupt you for 3 weeks, right? It's going to protect you from that because you're going to have a copy of your data. You're going to have backups of your data. You're going to have protocols in place, a playbook, if you will, on what to do in this situation. We hope that's what they'll do. But if you've got all those things, you're also going to be able to, I believe, have more future readiness and more future confidence in terms of how the business operates, instead of what dealers do right now. And I'll apologize for saying it right now, pointing the finger at everybody else for causing their problems.
Tim, it's uglier than that. They're like a little kid that breaks a lamp and close their eyes so their mommy can't see it. To close your eyes to the fact that if you understand your data and protect your data, you can use your data more efficiently.
Right. Correct. Yep. Tom, I know you got something to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to give various layers here. Number one, you don't want to be the dealer who has to call your third or fourth generation customer and tell them that their information's on the dark web. So if you want a good reason why to work on these things, there's reason number one. Number two, as a tip that everybody can implement right now today, I'd encourage all the dealers to, whatever means that you communicate to all your employees, but whether you're with Reynolds and Reynolds or CDK or whatever DMS you're on, if that password that you're using to get into your DMS is duplicated on other apps in your tech stack, you should make sure they change their passwords today. That's something that should be done immediately. And it doesn't matter whether you're on CDK or Reynolds and Reynolds, because good password hygiene is really a super easy way to start. And almost every human being, to Larry's point about being a student of the world, almost every human being has terrible password hygiene. The best way.
Wait a minute. You're telling me there's a problem with using the actual word password or your date of birth? What master criminal can figure that out?
Unbelievable, ladies and gentlemen.
You mean you should change it often, really?
and then I think the third thing, I've had conversations with some of my clients over the last week or so about whether they want to go to the effort and pay for a second backup DMS. And we've been having that conversation, as crazy as that sounds. And those conversations are just beginning. But depending on what your risk tolerance is, it's a completely logical conversation to have, right? If you're risk adverse and you want to be up no matter what, and you're gonna spend some money doing it, and that's your choice, then let's have that conversation. And I'm happy to have that conversation with anybody, because all risk mitigation is at the dealership is making sure that you've identified what the risk is, that you either have a plan or you're okay with the risk and know what it is. And so much of that is, as I said before Tim got on here, is the dealer's that's the dealer's decision, because it's his business and it's his money. So
Tom, would you got my little brain working again. Would you all agree that to not make a decision is to actually make a decision?
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally it is.
And it's usually not a good one, Larry. That's just kind of throwing caution to the wind. I mean, I had a good example a couple of years ago. I had a dealership call and say, look, we got defrauded out of 4 vehicles. I said, well, how did that happen? They said, well, we were making payoffs, and we had one in Indiana and one in Texas and one here and one there. And I said, well, it should be covered by your insurance policy. Why don't you send it to me, and I'll just take a look, and if it's covered, you can make a claim, and no big deal. And they sent me the insurance policy. It was the cheapest piece of junk I've ever seen, and did not have any coverage for it didn't have any false pretense coverage. And so you obviously you get what you pay for, and you get what you know that you pay for, even more importantly. And listen, I just had a client who renewed their insurance this morning. I was able to help them get the equal coverage and save $60,000 a year to get basically the same coverage they have now. So it's not always about spending more, and that's an important item to throw out here too. Is you may have fat or fluff in your current insurance program. Maybe you can reduce some of it. Maybe you can change it. Maybe you don't have 300 D tags for 100 employees, which you're going to pay dearly for if that's the case. There's a lot of different ways to look at it, but it's not always about spending more money. Sometimes it is. It just depends on, which insurance program.
Tom, the problem is, and I mean, I'm not kidding now, insurance isn't sexy. See, Tim, I had a guy call me up. I'm starting with a new dealer group. He says, man, I watched your videos. You're funny. You got energy. Insurance isn't sexy. There's nothing on a statement. There's no line that says what you missed by not following up or by not taking demos. Right. So if you can't measure what you lost rather than what you actually made, okay, no, again, Tim is a weirdo. He's a brilliant guy that isn't a nerd. Because some of the nerds you can have fun with Tim, but he's also super smart.
Right.
Okay? Tom, if you've ever hung with Tom, he's a funny, cool guy. But it's just not a sexy topic to talk about insurance. They'd rather think about some crazy scheme and the mail piece and let's put the big orange gorilla over the building. So the combination that it's not a sexy topic, and they'd rather think about what they can make than rather what they could lose. But if that was the concept, nobody that had a few bucks would have life insurance.
Right.
We have to think about, you always want to assume things are going to be the worst they can be. You prepare for the worst. You enjoy the best, but you prepare for the worst. Because unfortunately, all four of us are nice guys. I'm very lucky to have all three of you as friends. But all four of us have been through horrible things in our lives. People who died, bad situations, people that have betrayed us. So you want to keep smiling and be the best guy around. But you got to understand that there's people out there that want to hurt you, destroy you, and put you out of business. Some of your employees will do it without mentioning. What's the old thing? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. So to not protect yourself, Tim, I used the line before you got on the boxing thing. Last thing ref says, protect yourself at all times, because the numbers are so exponentially ridiculous as to where it is and what it is and how it is that I appreciate what guys like you do, because the industry needs it, and unfortunately, they're not always smart enough to understand that they need it. They'd rather go for the flashy object that really doesn't help them. Sometimes it hurts.
Well, and let me add one more vector to what we're talking about here too. When you talk about protecting yourself at all times, and that is the jam with the OEM and the dealer relationship is right now because of connected vehicles, because people pair their phones with their vehicles. The OEM has got a mainline opportunity to know more about your customer than you do. And I'll park it there for a second, but I have spoke at several 20 group meetings over the last 3 or 4 months. And I've had people in the room tell me that they've been getting directives from their OEMs that the data comes into the DMS and the OEM can have all the access to it, but the dealer has to either pay for access or cannot have access to all of it, right? So at the end of the day, when we think about this, when we think about business continuity, which is the CDK situation, there's also the growth and the continuous growth of your entity. You're at a crossroads right now where CDK has exposed you to show you that you just don't have control of the information that your business, your advertising, your salespeople, your fixed ops and tech desk you're the ones that basically helped create this data, and your customers gladly shared with you this data. Who has the right to it? Who has the opportunity to control it? And there are other things that I've talked to dealers about starting other businesses, to look at the, revenue diversification, to go start a dry cleaners, or go start something different with the same customer base, right? Before you even think about that, think about right now about the continuity opportunity you have to think about lifetime value and growing the relationships you have with your customers, respecting what you've built with them right now, instead of just listening to what the DMS is telling you, or what some of these other folks, including the OEM, are telling you have to do, when you should have the option in some states like Arizona, say that you have the absolute right to all the data that's in your dealership to control it. I don't understand why more of them aren't taking the steps to do that.
Well, I'll use an example, Tim.
It's willful ignorance.
Oh,
the only thing, that was brilliantly stated. The only thing I couldn't relate to, and neither can Tom, former owner, is OEM problems with dealerships. My OEM was great to me. They said every problem will be solved if I just take more cars. But I have too many cars. Take more, it'll be fine. Did you get that same great information, Tom?
Absolutely.
Well, I bought a vehicle, and I was being marketed to by Stellantis in my car, and the dealer had no idea what they were even marketing. They had no idea. Like in the actual car itself, it was sending me messages directly to the car. The dealer's like, "Well, what are they marketing?" I'm like, "Well, you should know. Like, you sold me the car. Like that's what scared me." But not only was it not great in terms of how it worked, but they had no idea like what the OEM was doing at all, which was kind of a little scary.
My boy Elon Musk figured it out. It's not about the car, it's about the information you control.
Oh, 100%.
And in the future, it's gonna be about subscriptions, right? BMW tried the heated seat subscription and it failed miserably, right? And so as you have profits that are gonna get compressed at the manufacturer level, they're gonna roll out more, in my opinion, they're gonna roll out more and more subscriptions. Because that's
Tom, you're
100%
right. Once the shock value goes away, okay, everything else falls into place. Lenny Bruce was one of the most brilliant comedian in his day, and he used foul language. They arrested him. They destroyed his life. Today, you can turn on any cable channel and hear somebody throw MF or 42 times. They're not even funny. Once we get over the shock, listen, data breaches. If somebody had your information 30 years ago, you called 7 cops and the lawyer. Today, another breach.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But yeah, no, I mean, I think, you guys are talking all around it. It's, and the way people, as I've been talking to them, I've had car dealers just look me in the eyes and say, we'll get to it. Or, we'll worry about it when it becomes our problem. Or, I think there's the obvious thing that humans are resistant.
Yes.
Well, none of us like change, right? None of us. It's uncomfortable. We like that, which is we park in the same parking space every day nearest the front door because it's ours, right? It's because that's how we do it. And we're at a point right now where everything is superfluous. It is so fluid. The way the market is going to change. It's not what we're talking about is not just cybersecurity, but it's electrification and it's data and it's customer relationship ownership and it's everything else the government is going to try to tell you that you need to do or what kind of car somebody needs to buy. You don't have control over 80% of these things, but you do have control over your data. That's the thing, is you've got an opportunity now to take control of it, to protect it, and again, to leverage it for all the positive things that are part of your DNA in terms of selling more and growing revenue.
And we're out of time. Wow, that went by quick. Crazy. I highly recommend, obviously, protecting your data, looking at your insurance, obviously looking at staffing, and maybe, to Larry's point, maybe the background of some of your staff. But also when you look at data, and I think my example with an email directly to my car from the OEM as a dealership, I think you need to be familiar with the communication, whether you're in control of it or not, between the manufacturer of the product, whatever that product is, and the customer that is really your customer. You spent the money. So I think that's something that you need to be aware of. But more importantly, have a plan B. Like, I think if anything's been proven in the last 2 weeks, it's, have a plan B just in case you get punched in the face, as we said earlier. But have yourself a great week.
If plan A doesn't work, there's 25 other letters.
Fantastic. Have yourself a great 4th of July. And if you're Canadian, a great Canada Day, which is today. And all the best as we roll through these challenging opportunities, as I like to say. Thanks for being on. Appreciate it.
Great seeing you, gentlemen.
Having us, everybody.
Bye.
Peace, gentlemen.
Bye.